My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am 59 years old, and the morning my life changed forever didn't begin with chaos or shouting or even a warning. It began with silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong the moment you open your eyes, like something has already happened, and your body knows it before your mind can catch up. I woke up expecting nothing more than another quiet morning, the same routine I had followed for years, but the moment I shifted slightly on my pillow, something felt off. There was a strange lightness around my shoulders, something missing that I couldn't immediately explain, and then I saw it, strands of silver hair scattered across my pillow. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was looking at. It didn't make sense, it couldn't. My fingers moved slowly, almost afraid, reaching up to touch my head, expecting to feel the familiar weight of my long hair resting down my back, but instead my hand met uneven, rough ends, jagged. Broken, wrong, my breath caught in my throat as panic began to rise, sharp and sudden. I rushed out of bed and stumbled toward the mirror, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. And when I saw my reflection, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. My hair, the one thing I had carried with me for decades, was gone. Not completely, but enough to feel like something sacred had been taken without permission. It wasn't cut neatly, it wasn't styled. It was uneven, careless, like something had been hacked away without thought, without respect. I reached up again, my fingers trembling as they brushed over the broken ends, and a quiet whisper escaped my lips before I could stop it. Why? I didn't even know who I was asking. I stepped out of my room slowly, my legs unsteady, as if I no longer belonged in the space I had lived in for so many years. The hallway felt unfamiliar. The walls, once filled with warmth and memories, now felt distant, like I was walking through someone else's home. And then I heard it. Laughter, soft, casual, unbothered. It came from the kitchen. For a moment I stood there, frozen, listening to it. That sound didn't match what had just happened. It didn't belong to my reality, but still I moved forward one slow step at a time until I reached the doorway, and that's when I saw them. Clara, my daughter-in-law, stood leaning casually against the counter, arms crossed, her expression calm, almost satisfied, as if she had been waiting for me to walk in. There was no shock on her face, no concern, no guilt. Only quiet amusement. Beside her stood my son, Ryan, my own son. His eyes were fixed on the floor, his posture stiff, his silence louder than anything he could have said. He didn't look at me, not once. And in that moment, I already knew. Clara spoke first, her voice light, almost pleasant, as if she were commenting on something completely ordinary. She said she had done me a favor, that it was time for a change. That I needed to look more appropriate, more modern, less like I was holding onto something outdated. Each word landed slowly, but the final one cut deeper than all the rest. You need to understand your place in this house. My place? The words echoed in my mind like something unreal, something distant but painfully clear at the same time. This house, the one I had lived in for over 30 years. The one I had built a life inside. The one filled with memories, laughter, love, and loss, reduced to a place where I needed permission to exist. I didn't shout, I didn't argue, I didn't even cry, but something inside me shifted. Because the truth is, this didn't happen overnight. This moment, this cruelty, it had been growing quietly for months, maybe even longer. Small changes, small signs, the kind you ignore when you don't want to believe something is wrong. The kind you excuse because facing the truth feels heavier than pretending everything is fine. There was a time when this house felt alive, when every corner held warmth. My husband, Thomas, he used to sit behind me every evening after dinner, gently brushing my hair with a patience that made the world feel softer. He would smile and say it looked like silver threads under the light, calm, steady, beautiful. Our life wasn't extravagant, it wasn't loud, but it was full of quiet love, shared moments, simple happiness. And when he passed away 7 years ago, the silence he left behind felt unbearable. But my hair remained, and somehow it became more than just hair. It became memory. It became connection. It became the last piece of a life I had lost. Keeping it long was never about appearance. It was about holding on to something that still felt like him. After he was gone, the house felt too big, too empty. The kind of empty that echoes when you walk through it alone. So when Ryan and his wife needed a place to stay, I didn't hesitate. I welcomed them with open arms. I told myself it was temporary. That having them there would bring life back into the house again, and at first it did. I cooked for them, cleaned, took care of everything without being asked. I even started sending money to their account every month, quietly helping them without making it a burden. It felt right, like I was still needed, like I still had a role, but slowly things changed. They stopped inviting me to sit with them during meals. Conversations became shorter, colder. Clara began speaking to me less like family and more like I was simply part of the background, something that existed but didn't matter. And Ryan, he changed too. The boy I raised, the one who once held my hand when he was afraid, began to disappear into silence. He agreed with her, followed her, avoided conflict even when it meant standing by while I was slowly being pushed aside. I told myself he was tired, stressed, trying to build a life. I made excuses for him because the truth felt heavier. But the truth was always there. I saw it in the way Clara spoke about the house, calling it old and heavy, like it was something holding her back. I heard it in her voice one afternoon when she casually mentioned that selling this place could solve all their problems if the opportunity ever came. If it didn't sound like a possibility, it sounded like a plan, and still, I stayed quiet. Because I believed love meant patience. I believed family meant endurance. I believed that if I just gave enough, stayed kind enough, everything would stay together, but I was wrong. Because slowly, without even realizing it, I disappeared inside my own life. And the day it happened, the day my hair was cut, wasn't sudden. It was the final step in something that had been building all along. That afternoon, rain tapped softly against the windows, creating that gentle rhythm I used to find comforting. I sat on the couch for just a moment, letting my body rest, and without realizing it, I drifted off to sleep. My hair spread behind me, loose and calm, just the way it always had been. And then a sound, sharp, metallic, a single snip. At first, my mind couldn't place it. It didn't belong to anything familiar. But then it came again, closer this time. I felt something, a pull, fingers gathering my hair tightly. My eyes opened slowly, still heavy with sleep, trying to understand what was happening. And when I turned my head, I saw her, Clara, standing behind me, holding a thick section of my hair in one hand and a pair of scissors in the other. For a second, just 1 second, my mind searched for an explanation that didn't feel cruel, something softer, something kinder. But the strands falling to the floor, the uneven weight on my shoulders, the look on her face told me everything. She had already been cutting it for a while, and she wasn't going to stop. And what happened next was something that would change everything I thought I knew about my own son, because when he finally spoke, his words didn't defend me. They justified her. And that moment was the moment I stopped being silent. For a moment after I turned and saw Clara standing there with the scissors in her hand, the world felt like it had stopped moving, not loudly or dramatically, but in a suffocating stillness where your mind struggles to understand what your eyes are seeing. My gaze shifted from the strands of my silver hair falling to the floor to her calm, almost satisfied expression, and then slowly to my son. Ryan stood just a few feet away, watching everything unfold. He wasn't shocked, he wasn't confused, and most painfully, he wasn't trying to stop her. That was the moment something inside me broke, not visibly, not with tears, but somewhere deep where words don't reach. Pain from a stranger can be endured, but silence from your own child, that leaves a different kind of wound. Stop, I finally managed to say, my voice fragile, barely holding together, but Clara didn't stop immediately. She made one final, slow cut, letting the last thick section of my hair fall from her hand like it meant nothing. There, she said casually, stepping back as if admiring her work, that's much better, better. The word echoed inside me as I slowly stood up, my hands trembling, loose strands sliding off my shoulders. I touched what was left, uneven, rough, unfamiliar, and for a moment it didn't feel like my own body. Why would you do this? I asked, my voice slightly stronger now, though still filled with disbelief rather than anger. Clara simply crossed her arms and tilted her head as if the question itself was unnecessary. I told you, she replied calmly, you needed it. Ryan finally spoke then, but not in the way I had hoped. Mom, it's not a big deal, he said quietly, avoiding my eyes, it's just hair. It'll grow back, just hair. Those words cut deeper than anything Clara had done because they came from him, from the boy I had raised, the one whose childhood I had shaped with my own hands. I looked at him carefully, searching for something familiar, but all I found was distance. You knew about this? I asked, my voice steady but low. He hesitated for a second, just enough to give me the answer before he even spoke. We talked about it, he admitted. Clara thought it would be better for you. You've been holding onto the past too much. It's not healthy. Holding onto the past. The words felt twisted, like something meaningful had been turned into a weakness. My past wasn't just memories, it was my life, my love, my years with his father, all reduced to something inconvenient for them. Clara, meanwhile, stepped past me without a second thought, grabbing a dustpan and sweeping my hair from the floor with neat, efficient movements as if she were cleaning up something disposable. No apology, no hesitation, just removal. Ryan stood there awkwardly, shifting slightly, uncomfortable, but not enough to stand up for me. I'm making lunch, Clara said casually as she walked away. Try to get used to it. It suits you more, and just like that for them, it was over, but for me, it had only just begun. I turned without another word and walked back to my room, each step heavier, each breath tighter. Closing the door behind me, I leaned against it for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. Then I walked slowly toward the mirror again, forcing myself to look, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to face what had just happened. The woman staring back at me looked smaller, not physically, but in presence, like something had been taken from her without her permission. But as I stood there longer, something else began to rise, not just pain, not just sadness, but awareness. Every small moment from the past months came rushing back, the meals I wasn't invited to, the conversations that ended when I entered the room, the way my presence had slowly faded into the background. And suddenly, it all made sense. This wasn't about hair, it had never been about hair. It was about control, about slowly pushing me out of my own life until I no longer had a place in it. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my hands resting in my lap, my thoughts clearer now than they had been in a long time. And then a quiet thought formed in my mind, steady and undeniable. This is your house. I lifted my head and looked around the room, at the walls, the furniture, the life I had built piece by piece. This house wasn't something I had been given. It was something I had created, and yet I had allowed myself to feel like a guest inside it. That realization didn't bring anger, it brought clarity, the kind that doesn't explode but settles deep and changes everything. That night, I didn't join them for dinner. I stayed in my room, not out of weakness, but because I was thinking. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting, I was understanding. The next morning, I opened the old wooden chest at the foot of my bed and pulled out a folder I hadn't looked at in years. When I opened it, there it was, the house deed, clear and undeniable, my name. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am 59 years old, and the morning my life changed forever didn't begin with chaos or shouting or even a warning. It began with silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong the moment you open your eyes, like something has already happened, and your body knows it before your mind can catch up. I woke up expecting nothing more than another quiet morning, the same routine I had followed for years, but the moment I shifted slightly on my pillow, something felt off. There was a strange lightness around my shoulders, something missing that I couldn't immediately explain, and then I saw it, strands of silver hair scattered across my pillow. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was looking at. It didn't make sense, it couldn't. My fingers moved slowly, almost afraid, reaching up to touch my head, expecting to feel the familiar weight of my long hair resting down my back, but instead my hand met uneven, rough ends, jagged. Broken, wrong, my breath caught in my throat as panic began to rise, sharp and sudden. I rushed out of bed and stumbled toward the mirror, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. And when I saw my reflection, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. My hair, the one thing I had carried with me for decades, was gone. Not completely, but enough to feel like something sacred had been taken without permission. It wasn't cut neatly, it wasn't styled. It was uneven, careless, like something had been hacked away without thought, without respect. I left the house without saying a word and drove straight to a law office across town. The building was simple, nothing impressive, but the moment I stepped inside, it felt like I had crossed an invisible line. A line between who I had been and who I was about to become. The lawyer I met was calm and direct. He didn't rush me, didn't interrupt me. He simply listened as I explained everything, not just what had happened the day before, but the slow, quiet changes that had led up to it. The way I had been pushed aside, dismissed, made to feel like I no longer belonged in my own home. When I finished, there was a brief silence before he asked me one simple question. "What do you want to do?" And for the first time, I answered without hesitation. I told him I wanted my house back, not legally because it had always been mine, but emotionally, physically, completely. I told him I wanted them out. Within an hour, everything was prepared. A formal notice, 30 days to vacate the property, financial support terminated immediately. No confusion, no space for argument, no room for manipulation. Just clear, firm boundaries, something I had never allowed myself to set before. As I walked out of that office, the air felt different, lighter. Not because the situation had become easier, but because I had finally stopped carrying it alone. When I returned home, the house looked exactly the same, but it didn't feel the same. Clara was sitting in the living room, flipping through her usual magazines while Ryan scrolled through his phone beside her. They both looked up when I entered, but neither of them spoke. Maybe they expected me to walk past quietly like I always did. Maybe they thought the silence from the day before meant I had accepted everything. But this time, I didn't move past them. I walked straight into the room and stood there holding the papers in my hand. "Sit down," I said calmly. There was something in my voice that made them listen. No hesitation, no attitude, just quiet authority. They exchanged a quick glance before doing as I asked. I stepped forward and placed the documents on the table between them. Clara reached for them first, her expression casual at first, but as her eyes moved across the page, that expression began to change. Confusion, then disbelief, and finally anger. "What is this?" she snapped, her voice sharp. Ryan leaned over, reading more carefully, his face slowly losing color as the meaning settled in. 30 days, leave the house. No financial support, legal notice, final. "Mom, this isn't serious, right?" he asked, his voice uncertain now, completely different from the day before. I looked at him, steady and calm. "It is," I said simply. The room fell silent. "You can't do this," Clara said quickly, her tone rising. "We live here, this is our home too." "No," I replied quietly, "you stay here, that's not the same thing." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to process everything. "Where are we supposed to go?" he asked. "How are we supposed to manage?" For a moment I just looked at him, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with truth. "The same way you expected me to manage," I said softly. "Without a place in my own home." That was the moment it hit him, not completely, but enough. Clara, however, didn't accept it. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're overreacting. It was just hair, you're acting like we did something terrible." I didn't raise my voice, I didn't argue, I simply met her gaze. "It was never about the hair," I said, and for the first time, she had no response. The days that followed were tense but quiet. They moved through the house like strangers, packing slowly, speaking less, avoiding me whenever they could. There were no more confrontations, no more arguments, just a heavy understanding that things were ending and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Ryan tried a few times to talk to me, to soften things, to suggest compromises, but I didn't step back. Not this time, because every time I looked at him, I remembered that moment, the moment he chose silence over me. On the 30th day, their bags were packed. Clara walked out first, her posture stiff, her pride still intact, as if admitting fault would cost her more than leaving the house. Ryan lingered for a moment longer. He stood near the door, looking at me like he wanted to say something real, but the words never came. After a few seconds, he lowered his eyes and walked out, and just like that, they were gone. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed should have felt empty, but it didn't. It felt peaceful. The house felt different almost immediately, not because it was quiet, but because it was mine again. I opened windows that had stayed shut for too long, letting fresh air move through every room. I rearranged furniture, cleaned spaces that had been neglected, brought life back into corners that had felt forgotten. Slowly, gently, I reclaimed everything. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror again. My hair was still short, uneven in places, a reminder of what had been taken. But as I looked at myself, I didn't see weakness anymore. I saw strength. Weeks passed and life began to feel lighter. I started doing small things for myself again, taking walks, sitting outside with a cup of tea, allowing myself to exist without feeling like I was in the way. The house was no longer just a place filled with memories. It was a place filled with peace. Then one evening, my phone rang. "Ryan," I stared at his name for a moment before answering. His voice was different, quieter, heavier. He told me things hadn't worked out, that they were struggling. that he finally understood how much I had done for him, how much he had taken for granted. He apologized, not quickly, not carelessly, but sincerely. I listened. And when he finished, I told him something he didn't expect. "I'll help you," I said. There was a pause on the other end, but not the way I did before. I gave him time, guidance. A chance to rebuild, but with boundaries that would not be crossed again, and this time he accepted. Slowly, things began to change, not immediately, not perfectly, but genuinely. He found work, learned responsibility, began to understand what it meant to stand on his own. Now, he visits sometimes, not as someone who needs a place to stay, but as someone who wants to reconnect. And me. I'm no longer the woman who stays silent to keep peace. I'm the woman who finally understands her worth. Because I've learned something most people realize too late: if you don't set boundaries, people will decide your value for you. And the moment you stop accepting less than you deserve is the moment your life truly begins again. And what my son learned the hard way was something he will never forget. But what I did after that day didn't just change him. It saved me.